Hey, and welcome to Gathering 208. We're so excited to have you joining us. We are continuing to talk about women in the Bible and learning from those stories. We're going to start off with talking about some damaged relationships in talking about Hosea and Gomer. So have you ever had a friend fail? I know that there's probably countless stories that I've had a fail in a relationship with friends or really anybody. But one stands out pretty clearly in my mind, mostly because it's brought up so often to this day. A couple of years after we graduated college, a friend of mine invited me and my roommate over for dinner one evening and to hang out. And always up for a good time and socializing, I was all in. So we went over to her apartment with her and her roommate, and she made dinner, and we had tons of fun just talking and, hanging out for the night to when, up until the point when she brought out a birthday cake and said, "Thank you for coming over to celebrate my birthday." To which I thought, it's your birthday? And for those of you that know me, know that I take my birthday very seriously, as well as friends and people that I love. I will plan birthday events, like down to which snack I want to eat after birthday lunch, weeks in advance. And I put way too much pressure on loved ones as far as setting birthday expectations, to which you all can send your sympathies to my boyfriend who just experienced Julie's first birthday, which happened to be my 30th. So but yeah, so for somebody who loves birthdays, then going to a birthday party that I didn't know it was a birthday party, kind of a reverse surprise party as we like to call it, felt like a pretty big fail. So after this surprise birthday cake came out, my roommate and I panicked. We felt awful. And I had been friends with Allie for years at this point. And dinner ended, we cleaned up, they probably cleaned up. And Kaylee and I were texting saying we have to go get her a present or something. How did we forget it's her birthday? I mean, Facebook existed. It was probably on there. Maybe it wasn't. Allie's kind of like that. But so we leave. We're like, well, thanks for dinner. It's been fun. Happy birthday. And we then go out on the town and start scrambling to buy a birthday present. Because we just felt so awful and wanted to make her feel special after not making her feel special. So we then return to her house with her surprise birthday present. And, it all, like I said, it's something that's brought up probably anytime one of the gals in our group has a birthday, and I pipe in with a birthday text prior to 4 p.m., shortly after this birthday, I waited till 10 p.m. for another friend. And that's all, something that we can laugh at now. But, if that would have happened to me, for somebody that loves birthdays, my heart would have been a lot more broken than Allie's heart was. But that's just a small example of a damaged relationship, or what could have been damaging. So, have you felt like you've hurt someone before, or maybe you've been hurt? Because people are not perfect, and we are all in relationships with friends, significant others, colleagues, and those relationships are bound to be hurt at times, and sometimes quite frequently. And like I said, there's definitely more serious things than, missing a birthday, that we're all going to feel pain from. And I want to look at the story of Hosea and Gomer. And Hosea chapter 1, verse 2 through 3. It says, "When the Lord first began speaking to Israel through Hosea, he said to him, 'Go and marry a prostitute, so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution.' This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods. So Hosea married Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she became pregnant and gave Hosea a son. So this story, Hosea and Gomer, oftentimes when we talk about the book of Hosea, we're talking about Hosea. We're talking about how, his relationship with Gomer, he's asked by God to marry a prostitute. And that could not have been easy. And I feel like it's almost a recipe for a damaged relationship, right off the bat. God's asking him to marry a prostitute, which is Gomer. And then some of the children will be conceived in prostitution, meaning after they've been married, Gomer goes and continues into prostitution. So not only is she a prostitute, but she's an adulterous prostitute, which is like just after you have the wound, just sticking it in there a little bit more. And I can't imagine the hurt and just the damage that comes from that relationship, but that's what God asked Hosea to do. And I think about that, and I think about, has God asked you to do hard things? Absolutely. And then there's sometimes the question of why. But God, when we're looking at the book of Hosea, we're looking at the story of not only Hosea and Gomer, but that is reflecting the story of Israel and God. And ultimately, by extension, our relationship in God. So the Israelites, they are just in this period of sin and turning away from God. They're worshiping other gods. They're worshiping the god of Baal, who's the god of fertility and crops, where their form of worship is basically like a temple prostitution, just things that maybe in the eyes of Baal is considered worship to him, but in the eyes of God is not active worship, or acts of worship. And it's committing this form of spiritual adultery, so we look at Gomer, who is committing adultery to Hosea, and then we look at the Israelites and we look at ourselves and just examples of committing spiritual adultery. And I think of that in like common or like current terms, what that would look like or what that means. And I think about how we have idols, how there's things where we may not be committing temple prostitution, worshiping the god of Baal, where we are putting other things in front of our relationship with God, where we're having work or other earthly relationships or money, or those are our priorities. Those are things that we are continually focusing on and putting our energy toward in almost an act of worship. All of our time, energy, thoughts, goals, all of that, where that goal is, maybe money or status or an earthly relationship, and it's not on God. That focus and that relationship is not on our relationship with God. So we're committing that spiritual adultery. We're putting other gods before God. We're having idols. And God's response to that is righteous anger. New Testament talks about God being a jealous God. And by having other idols, by having other gods, that's breaking God's heart. That's making him angry. We're going to look at Hosea again, chapter 1, verse 4, and it says, "And the Lord said, name the child Jezreel, for I am about to punish King Jehu's dynasty to avenge the murders he committed at Jezreel. In fact, I will bring an end to Israel's independence." Verse 6 says, "Soon Gomer became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. And the Lord said to Hosea, name your daughter Lo Ruhamah, which means not loved, for I will no longer show love to the people of Israel or forgive them." Verse 8 through 9 says, after God had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she again became pregnant and gave birth to a second son. And the Lord said, name him Lo Ammi. Not great at Hebrew. And that name means not my people. For Israel is not my people, and I am not their God. And these verses in Hosea, it just shows God's response to the spiritual adultery of Israel. And it shows that anger that he has. And he's showing that by asking Hosea to name his children things that mean not loved and not my people. Which I think would be a hard pill to swallow when people are thinking about their babies' names and kids' names. I hear a common thing saying, like, how can you make that a nickname? Or like, how can that be turned to something bad? You know, and then if it can, people don't really like to pick that. But then God's telling Hosea, no, this child's going to mean, their name is going to mean not loved and not my people, because of his righteous anger that he has towards the Israelites during this time. Along though with this anger, there is a but. Because God has another response. And his other response to the Israelites, to Gomer, to us, is this unfailing or redeeming love. And for those of you who may understand where I'm pulling redeeming love from is one of the reasons why I thought it was a good idea to choose Gomer when we were discussing women of the Bible. Josh had asked me, you know, who do you think we should preach on? And I said, Gomer, because she's in my favorite book, Redeeming Love. And I said that a little bit preemptively, I think. I've read the book too many times to count. And then reading the book of Hosea, they're not the same. So just a sideline. Mostly in the fact that what the book Redeeming Love is it's a fictitious kind of story of Hosea and Gomer's relationship. And in the book of Hosea in the Bible, Gomer is mentioned in chapter 1. They think chapter 2 is likely referring to her, and some in chapter 3. And then the rest of the book is talking a lot about the Israelites. So she's not like the main focus, but this book kind of gives a fictitious, just like a story on what their marriage and relationship looked like and what it looked like for Hosea to pursue Gomer. And what I loved about that and what I love about the imagery is that, first of all, he is told by God to seek out Gomer, knowing that she is a prostitute and going to be a prostitute. But he obeys and he does it. And then, and this is not just the story, this is also obviously the Bible portion of it, but she then goes and is further commits adultery, and then has children in those adulterous relationships. And he continues to love her and continues to pursue her. And it shows how the Israelites and how we continue to fail and we continue to make mistakes and we continue to sin and turn away from God and commit spiritual adultery, sometimes in small actions, sometimes in big actions. But there's this unfailing love that God shows his people. And there's this redeeming love that our relationships are restored and we are constantly pursued. And when we ask for forgiveness and we come back to God, he is welcoming us back. And not only, it's not us having to crawl back and beg for this forgiveness. We're going to ask for forgiveness, but in that time as well, God's going to pursue us and he's going to attempt to restore that relationship as well. And know for us that it's this open invitation. Hosea chapter 2 verses 14 through 15 says, "But then I will win her back once again. I will lead her into the desert and speak tenderly to her there. I will return her vineyards to her and transform the valley of trouble into a gateway of hope." And that just talks, about Hosea's relationship, leading her back. He talks about transforming the valley of trouble, that valley of spiritual adultery, of that damaged relationship, and turning it into a gateway of hope. In this story as well, not only is Hosea, continuing to pursue his wife Gomer and to pursue that relationship, he goes so far as to purchase her back from prostitution, which I just think is it's astounding to me when I think about that. And I think about it in modern terms as well. So if in modern times, Hosea marries a prostitute, they have a baby, she goes back to prostitution, she commits adultery, she has another baby, then again, it continually is happening. And at one point in this return to prostitution, in this in these acts of adultery, Hosea goes so far as to going and purchasing her back, to bring her back and show that unfailing love, that redeeming love, and restoring that relationship. Chapter 3 verse 1 says, "Then the Lord said to me, go and love your wife again, even though she commits adultery with another lover. This will illustrate that the Lord still loves Israel, even though the people have turned to other gods and love to worship them." So Hosea takes his own money, purchases her out of prostitution, pays for his wife. And that is what God did for us believers. In Romans 5, chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners." While we were still committing spiritual adultery, God purchased us with the ultimate sacrifice of his son, of Jesus. And there's no pre-qualifiers for this. However you are right now is what God is buying back. What he wants back is what he's redeeming. We don't have to clean ourselves up. We don't have to, Gomer doesn't commit adultery, get pregnant, live by herself for a while, prove that she's not going to cheat on him, and come home to Hosea. Or, we're not required to go to church for 7 weeks and not commit the same sin for a certain amount of time, or pray so many forgiveness prayers. We're coming to God as we are. And that's how he's accepting us. That's how he's redeeming us, forgiving us, and showing his unfailing love. There's a saying that says, hurt people hurt people. And I think that we can go and say that redeemed people redeem people. Now, we can't redeem others like Christ redeems us, where we are seen in the eyes of God as redeemed. But in our relationships with one another, just the same that a hurt person easily hurts somebody else, when we are shown that redeeming love, when we are forgiven by those that we've hurt, we also need to show that forgiveness. And God has forgiven us for our sins, and we need to forgive others as well. And that's something that is not easy. Sometimes it it's a lot easier to have that chip on your shoulder and to kind of allow those things to wedge in between relationships and to allow relationships to become damaged. But God asks us to show the forgiveness that he's shown us, and to forgive others and to love others the way that he has loved us. And Jesus is an example of how we should be living, how we should be loving others, how we should be forgiving those around us. And he is the perfect example of relationships. Reflecting what Jesus does with our relationships with the Father, which is restore and redeem. With that being said, it is also appropriate to have boundaries. And there are some relationships that you should not go back to, that it's unhealthy, and that is okay as well. And that's something, that keeping in mind that having healthy boundaries in relationships is important. It's not something that, by doing what God does and redeeming those, forgiving those around us when those relationships around us are damaged, that doesn't make us a doormat. It's appropriate and healthy for us to have boundaries as well. But always carrying that chip on our shoulder and allowing those wedges to come in relationships, and not forgiving those that you love and those around you the same way that God forgives us. We need to have that redeeming aspect in relationships as well. And sometimes that takes time and it takes practice. And a lot of times in your close personal relationships with friends, significant others, spouses, you're going to have to forgive a lot, and you're going to have to show that unfailing love a lot as well. But sometimes bringing a birthday present late is better than bringing no present at all or forgetting the birthday altogether. Let's pray. God, I thank you for this night. I thank you for this time, Lord, and for this lesson that you show us, God. I thank you for your forgiving heart, for your grace, and for your mercy, Lord. Help us to learn from Hosea and Gomer, God, and help us to learn from you. Help us to love those around us with that unfailing love, with that redeeming love, and help us to forgive those that hurt us. And thank you, Lord. I just thank you for these lessons. I thank you for the people of Gathering 208 and for our time together tonight.